don't remember hearing growing up in the church, and that's why I think it's very important for me to kind of talk about it. So, if you look at the Greek word for canon, it's kanon. It's very easy, right? It sounds the same. And the word for law is nomos. So, canon law is not to be confused with secular law. And that's a big thing when it comes to studying the laws of the church, the church laws. You might be like, I never heard this before. What does that mean? I'm going to get into that in a very simple way. I'm going to explain that. But from a pedestrian point of view, I want to kind of just start off with this quote from Father Joseph Allen. He's one of my professors. So this is a quote, and this is a good way to start us off to kind of get us all on the same page. Because again, I just threw the term at you, canon law. What's canon law? What's ecclesiology? I just want to start off with what he said. He said, when the average Orthodox hears the word canon law, among the things that may come to mind are dusty code or set of severe religious regulations resulting in excommunication, right, for the slightest thing. From it, the canons are pastoral standards, manifesting God's saving truth rather than a set of harsh authoritarian rules. So, the church has laws, it has rules, it has things that should be guiding us, and the first thing any Orthodox Christian might do is assume that it's very harsh, authoritarian, like, I didn't know that the church is into laws, I thought we got past that when we went from Judaism to Christianity, right? And that's why we might have these presuppositions, these thoughts on canon law. We think there's something like not pastoral at all, and he says, no, they are. For those of you who don't know what pastoral is, it's just like they have a very practical use for the spiritual guide and fathers in the church. That's basically what that means. So I'm going to try to do my very best to explain to you how these things are actually very useful in our orthopraxy, our practice of the Orthodox faith, right? Our practice of the faith should match up our orthodoxy, right? And you'll see what I mean by this as I move forward. Let's take it in a very simple way. We all know about the Ten Commandments, right? You know the Ten Commandments, right? We should know what these are. You shall not, you shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make gods or worship gods, right? Or worship them. That's idolatry, right? And the list goes on. We know the Ten Commandments, right? So from the beginning, there's this idea of the law, right? We can't get out of it. We can't deny that, right? There's the laws of God. And it's important for us not to think or assume right away that laws are limits and boundaries and they're something that trap me and keep me, not able to be free. But it's the opposite. The laws of God actually free us from slavery to all these sins, right? That's how we should kind of see the laws of God, right? And so I want you to think about canon law in the same way. They're not a bunch of restrictions and rules and regulations and protocol and procedure. And actually, this is what gives the institution of the church its integrity. Imagine if you go to a job and they don't have like hierarchy and they don't have protocol and procedure. You would say this is like some fluffy place, I don't want to work for it, right? And imagine the church being whatever, right? Wouldn't you think like this is not what, like some of us may feel like this is not for me, right? You wouldn't feel like it's legit. You wouldn't feel like this is, thought out and planned and awesome. And I love it. I love being part of something so structured and organized, right? And that's really what canon law is about. It's about structure, it's about organization, and I'm going to get into that. I just kind of wanted to say this really quick. We hear things like the letter of the law, the spirit, what's all this about? When we shift from Judaism to Christianity, there's more of an emphasis on the spirituality, the spirit of the law, right? Not by the letter, right? Because the Pharisees were very hypocritical. They knew the laws, right? weren't able to do much with it, right? I mentioned this to the high schoolers just like an hour ago. You know, if there's one group of people that Jesus was really harsh with, it was the Pharisees. Paul was a Pharisee. St. Paul was a Pharisee. He knew everything, right? But what was he doing? He was going off and, killing Christians, right? I mean, if you go back, you shall not murder, right? Does he know the spirit of it? Not really. He's just zealous. He's been radicalized, right? Sometimes we could be that way with our orthodoxy, right? And that's what I want to get into as well. The canon law has there's a big risk in getting involved with the church laws and being too extreme or too flexible with them. And I'm going to get into that. All right, so when I think about this, I always wonder what the sources of the canons are. And I've attended so many servant prep classes, I've taught so many servant prep classes, and I know that in our church, the Coptic church especially, we stop right at the councils. We say the date of the council, we say the number of attendees. That's it. That's as far as we go in servants prep. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? Who here has heard of canons that come out of councils? This is news to us, I think, right? Canon law coming out of a council. That was news to me when I got to seminary. This is a couple of years ago. So I mean, I'm not blaming you. I'm just telling you that we need to up it up a bit. We need to actually know our faith a bit more and understand and know what our church is saying. So let's look at ecumenical councils. We know of Nicaea, Constantinople, and Ephesus, right? The three major ones. I know it's small, but let me just tell you, 35 canons came out of those three councils. Did you know that? I mean, that's just a number. But who's going to make the effort to actually look at the canon? What does it say? What does it mean? Why did they come up with this rule?
This is only 35 things relating to those three specific councils?
Yeah, those three ecumenical councils, the three major councils of the church.
Outside of those, our church has instituted quite a few other canons.
Oh yeah, I'm just giving you an idea here, but you see each section here has more canons. So if you look at the Eastern Orthodox collection of canon law, they call it the Pedalion or the Rudder. And I'm going to get into that. The Pedalion or the Rudder is a collection of over 1,000 canons. But why is that number so high? It's because if you know about the Eastern Church, you know that they have 7 ecumenical councils, right? And those extra 4 councils add a ton more canons. And then you have more local councils, which were on a local level, right? So what happened, I'll give you an idea of this. Ecumenical is when the whole entire church meets up, all the bishops. Local council is almost like Ember David calling the priests of his diocese to have a local council. But that's still a legit council, you get what I mean? That's the difference, that's the distinction between ecumenical, right, the whole world, and a local council. So what I did here was I went from 451 down. And I'm assuming that these are all the canons, sources of canons, in the Coptic Church. So this is the Coptic Rudder, Coptic Pedalion. Make sense? And by the way, you can't find this. Nobody actually compiled this. Nobody, as far as I know, no one has compiled this. This is very important. There's another source of canons in the church, that is the Church Fathers. Look at how many of those names have Alexandrian at the end of them. So many Alexandrian fathers were contributors to the canonical tradition, which is another amazing thing. And then again, here in our modern Coptic church, we have no clue what the canons are. Again, this is our fault. We need to discover our orthodoxy. We have to understand how to even do canon law. What's the point of it? I'm going to get into all of that. But I just wanted to give you this background, right? Does this make sense? And then there's canons of the Holy Apostles, which I didn't include here, which is another, that comes from the Didascalia, which was a document found not too long ago, right? And we have a lot of good information in it. All right, so the nature of the church and its guiding principles. So, oikonomia, I'm using these words because these are the words they use for this subject. It comes from the word economy. Economy, or the plan of salvation. God has a plan for salvation for the church, right? The church, if you want to think about it, I'm going to skip a slide, is like this sailboat. The church, a symbol of the church is a boat with Christ as what? The captain. I was explaining this to someone not so long ago. Yeah, I was prepping for this. Does that make sense? And I'm also jumping the gun, but I'm going to go back and just explain this. My slides are out of order, my thoughts were everywhere, but it's okay. We can take questions at the end. Economia. What's economia? God has a plan of salvation for the church, for those who are inside the boat, right? And in canon law, it means there's flexibility to the law or the rule. So, say we find a canon, right? And I'm going to give you an example of a canon. A canon can be applied in a rigorous way or a flexible way. A casual, lenient way. So economia is what I mean. What I mean by that is economia is flexibility of the law. So the law is this. The priest or the bishop could say, we're going to be flexible on this. So I'll give you an example later on about economia and how that makes sense to a canon. I might as well say it now so it helps you understand this. There's a canon that says a priest can't be ordained before the age of 30. There's a canon from the Council of Neo-Caesarea, which is the local council of 315. I'll show it to you later, but there's a council that says the priestly candidate cannot be ordained before the age of 30 because the Lord began his ministry at the age of what? 30. But I'm going to explain how there's economia to that rule. Does that make sense? So if someone's 26, 27, it's like, oh my God, we're breaking the canons of the church. We're going against the church. We're not orthodox anymore. That's what? That's archivia. Archivia is strictness to a very less weighty matter. Okay, there's weightier matters and there's less weightier matters. When the bishop is overseeing the whole church, there's weighty matters and then there's less weightier matters. And I'm going to explain that. Make sense? Make sense? All right. I just don't want to lose anyone. So there's economia, which is flexibility of the canon. And then there's archivia, which is the strictness of the canon. Like we have to apply it strictly. It's almost like a physician having the discernment to say, I need to apply more or less of this. You get what I mean? He should be talented and skilled enough to say, this is the solution or this is what I need to do, but because I'm in the position to make a decision, I know what I need to apply, how much or how little. Make sense? And so it's for the bishop and the priest to decide how things are to be applied. And each case is its own case. So when you see a bishop making a decision with one candidate or one person or one situation or one case, you can't say, well, how come he did that? Well, Ambabola let them get a divorce and I couldn't get a divorce, right? This funny stuff, right? You get what I'm saying? There's a bishop in the church that takes care of these, divorce things and canon laws get involved and all this stuff, right? Does that make sense? So these are some symbols of the church. The church is like a ship, right? It's like Noah's Ark, right? God commands Noah to build an ark. He says, get in the ark because I'm going to destroy this world. I regret it. I regret creating you. I'm just going to save a few people, right? It wasn't a bunch of people. It was just like a few people. And that's the church, by the way. And I know that's hard to hear, hard to accept, and it's a little confusing. And from them, he recreated the world. He says, little flock. He doesn't say, you ton of people, come follow me. He says, little flock, right? He says, you select few. Come with me. I'm going to put you in the ark, and you're going to be the new creation. You're going to be how I start over. And it's the same for the church, believe it or not, today. We're the little flock that is part of the recreation of the world, okay? I know this sounds like, whoa, that's out there, dude, calm down, chill, come on, bro. Don't get too, church is singular, not plural. There's no churches. It's one church, right? Or would you disagree? Do you agree or disagree?
There's parishes.
There's parishes, that's one thing. Parishes meaning there's satellite churches, right? Of one, what? Ecclesia, one church.
I'm just kidding.
All right, and the church is the people, right? Would you agree? Right? You are the members and Christ is what? The head, right? That's a church. That's the church. The church isn't brick and mortar and a building and, property and real estate, and it's not about that, right? All right, so I want you to think about canon law for a minute here. How does canon law relate to this ship? All right, I hope you can see what I kind of highlighted or circled there. We talked about Noah's Ark, we talked about the church being the ship, right? But what steers the ship? Did you ever think about that? When I was a little kid, I thought what steered the ship was the sail. Do you think that's right? No, it's not the sail. It's not the sail that steers the ship. What steers the ship? What? The rudder. And that's where, for me, it clicks. When the Eastern Church calls the canons of the church the rudder, right? Remember how I said the canons are the rudder? It really made a lot of sense for me. Like, it was like an epiphany for me, right? Think about that. It's what we don't see, people. The canons of the church is so deep in the church, we don't even see it. There's something guiding us that's underneath us. Do you get that? And that's the canon law of the church. The canon law of the church is the rudder of the church. It's what guides us to salvation. It leads us, it puts us on the way. It knows how to get around a huge wave that's going to sink the ship. Right? Who's the captain of the ship again? Christ. It's for him to make that call. Go left, go right, go 30 degrees, whatever. You get what I'm saying? It's his decision. Make sense? It's not our decision where the church goes and how it maneuvers in the crazy world that we live in. Make sense? But we're in it. And we decide to jump out of it or save people that are begging for help. Right? It's just that simple. Those who are inside are saved, and those that are not are what? Perishing. It's pretty straightforward. Right? And then we know the story of Noah and how the flood recedes, and they land, and everything is starting over, and the world is being recreated, and all of that good stuff. I mentioned this earlier, right? I don't need to go over this again. I'll be done very soon because I'm moving quick, and I want you to know that there is a spirituality to the canons of the church. You should not be your own guide, right? You shouldn't just say, well, I think or I feel or, I'm interpreting the laws or the canons of the church in this way. It's almost like telling the physician and the doctor how to use the medicine, right? Don't tell the priest or the bishop, forgive me for saying this, but don't tell them how to apply medicine, okay? There's penitential canons in the church. Have you heard of these? If you read the canons, you're going to be like, oh my God, the church is ridiculous, right? You'll say something like that. I felt like that. I was reading the canons, it's like, oh, if you commit this sin, do not approach the chalice for 30 years. Can you imagine a priest saying that to you? Why is the church doing this to its people? Isn't this like abuse? Isn't this like pastoral misconduct? When I was in seminary, I heard this stuff and I was like blown away. I was like, oh my God. People would spend 30 years repenting over one thing that they did that we do like nothing today. Can you imagine? I remember feeling like this is impossible. And what's wrong with my priest? He doesn't know how to be a priest. He should know the laws of the church. I shouldn't be taking communion forever. Like, that's it. It's over. Like, why am I even doing this, right? But it goes back to what? Archeveia and what? Economia. And who decides? The priest and the bishop who's given the authority to apply the medicine and apply and lead and guide you in your spiritual life. Make sense? And you shouldn't look at other people in your community. Well, I know he does the same thing, but I didn't see him go to communion. Oh, and I go to the same confession, Father. Why is Abuna being different with this guy and different with, like, why are we not the same? Well, do you know that there's different personalities? There's someone that's very easygoing. What does the easygoing guy need? Someone he needs some archivia, right? But if I apply archivia, strictness, to an already strict person, what's that? That's suicide. It's like, go kill yourself, pretty much, right? Like, right? That's a priest that's not trained. Or that's a priest that doesn't know his parishioner. Do you get it? So you have to know who you're dealing with. Or someone that's easygoing. It's like, I'm here, man. Like, just live your life. I'm going to go and just do this today. And imagine the priest is like, yeah, man, just go, man. Just go, do have fun, man. I'll see you later. And you imagine the priest being like that. Economia with an economia kind of person, right? Flexibility with flexibility. It's a disaster. Usually in a family structure, you have a mom and a dad. One's strict and one's what? Flexible. It's just balance, people. It's just balance. Okay? Make sense? So the canons of the church have a spirituality to them. They're supposed to guide us. They're not supposed to make our life miserable. Right? And you should demand this from your priest, by the way. You should demand that they know who you are and that they understand how to apply the medicine. And you could tell them how it's working, how it's not working. Abuna, you need to get a little stricter. Abuna, you need to, come on. Like, I'm not feeling you. You're a little easy on me. And then that's up for him. That's for him to decide. Make sense? But if I'm strict on myself or easy on myself, like, who am I to decide? Why am I even going to Abuna? It's because I'm seeking counsel, second opinion. Why do people proofread a paper? Why do you get another person to proofread your paper? A second set of eyes, right? It's valuable. It's really valuable. You're blind to your own mistakes. Make sense? I write papers all the time. I'm so blind. I show it to like one person. Wow. I show it to Chris. It's over. He's like, write the paper over, right? You get what I'm saying? Archivir. Economia.
I think that can also be taken to an extreme because some people, like in order for the paper to be proofread, it has to be written first.
Yeah.
Some people don't. They just go to their priest to like ask them like, what do I do now? Like
that's the person that comes to church sleeping.
Yeah.
Right? Like unprepared, right?
Work for yourself.
And the teacher always gets pissed off from those students, right? I mean, people have tolerance, right? There's a certain level of tolerance. You know your good students from your bad students, and it's sort of like you don't want to be more tough on those that are like that need more attention, but you kind of just want to smack some sense into them. So you kind of understand where the church is coming from, right? It's like, wake up, man, wake up. It's for your own good. Like, you don't need to be here, right? Like, you show up to class because you want to learn, right? It's just that simple. It's like simple. You have a desire to learn, you show up, you learn, and you ask questions. All right, but if you don't have that spirit and you're just like criticizing everything, and you know better, and you should be the priest, and you should be the bishop, and you know better than the laws of the church, and you're above all these things, then what's the point? Why are you like wasting your time? You get what I'm saying? Like, why are you even in the ship? Right? If you don't believe it, if you're not part of it, if you don't have any convictions, then just save your time. Go do something else. Right? I'm sorry for being so blunt, but that's the truth. So I kind of touched on all of these things. I want to talk about church organization, structure, and order. Think about the Lord's Prayer that you repeated 1,000 times in your life. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Right? Thy kingdom come. Right? Am I saying it right? Thy will be done. On earth as it is what? In heaven. Repeat that. On earth as it is in what? On earth as it is in what? Heaven. On earth as it is in what? Heaven. So hold up. Think for a minute. You think for a minute. I actually had a big disagreement with someone just a few days ago. He's like, the Lord's Prayer is wrong. The church on earth is not like it is in heaven. So I said, okay, so you don't believe in the church. He like kind of like was taken back by my response to him. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, you just said it. You said it's not like the same. So you're saying that the Lord is wrong. He was wrong about that. So you're above Christ, and you're saying, no, there's no perfection here on earth. What do you think about this idea? that the earth, the church, the ecclesia on earth is what? As it is in what? Heaven. Did you ever think about this? Well, I'll tell you what it means in canon law. In canon law, it means, this hit me again through iconography and liturgy. This hit me in a very hard way when I actually went to liturgy in the seminary and I actually paid attention to the iconography and what the church is saying to me in just a silent way, just by watching them. I put two pictures here, and there's a difference between their iconography program and our iconography setup. You know the Last Supper that we have over the iconostasis? They have that inside the sanctuary. For me, that was like, that's amazing. I wish we had that. All right, but it's okay. It's okay. So Christ is inside, you see that? And he has the body in one hand and the blood on the other hand, and he's distributing it to who? Disciples. And they're what? They're around him. And it's in the sanctuary. So it's not the Pantocrator icon that we have. It's the Last Supper icon inside, around, like going around the dome, the half dome that we have inside the sanctuary. Now, this is what blew me away. Do you see where the bishop and the deacons are standing? They're standing in the position of who? Christ and who? The disciples. I will show you a picture of a bishop, right? Like say the highest priest that's there. He'll stand under Christ because he's officiating the liturgy. And then you have the next in line priest or bishop. And then the priests and then deacons, right? And they make up the 12. And they all sit down in the position of those people. What does that mean? That the earth, the church on earth reflects the church in what? Heaven. That's what that means. That's what that means. I got goosebumps when I think of that and when I'm part of that. And that's the mystical supper, people. That's what you're part of. Can you imagine someone telling you, sit here? Like, who am I? Abu Hana did it and he's like, sit here. I was like, okay. When God is telling you your reward is to sit with me on my throne, how does that make you feel? It's amazing. It's amazing. Unworthy, yeah, but at the same time, that's amazing. That your reward is to sit on the throne. That's not something I should take lightly, right? So that's what it means. That's what the structure and the organization of the church, that's where that comes from. So, guys, we're not a bunch of people wearing costumes and just doing a reenactment. Does that make sense? Some of us criticize the Orthodox Church. These people are high church. Calm down. We need to be like low church. Like, let's just be casual about this. Come on, man. We don't got 3 hours for this. But this is why this is high church. High church has that beauty to it. It's one long song. It's beautiful. You know, there's rubrics, there's laws. It's not improvised. It's not like you just come in and you say what you want to say, right? It's supposed to reflect the kingdom. Okay, this is an overused quote, but I had to throw it in there for those of you who didn't hear this before. He who does not have church as mother cannot have God as father. Cyprian of Carthage. This is so important. Why? Because we can't gain access to God without the mother. If I'm not being nourished by the church, I'm never going to grow to full maturity and know my Father. I'm never going to make it to the kingdom of heaven because I'm not mature. Okay? I have to be mature. I have to know the church as my mother, and then I can know God as my Father. Make sense? So don't take like church services lightly. Don't take the canons lightly. Try to work with it. Try to understand the wisdom of the church instead of thinking your wisdom exceeds these people and the captain of the ship. Oh, forget that. You know, I know that sail is on a cross, and yeah, what's that cross? Like, what's his life mean? Like, you know, I could have done the same thing. I could have died for all these people. Yeah, like, who cares? Like, who cares if there's a rudder or no rudder? We're gonna make it, right? It's that like, who cares kind of attitude that's going to kill us, people. That's what's going to destroy us. That's what's going to make us lose our way. This carelessness. Imagine being on this ship and knowing that this is how I'm going to be saved. Are you going to give your spot up or no? You're going to hold on to your spot for dear life. You know when you go into like a tight restaurant and everyone's trying to get in there? And it's like, no, that's my seat. And you sit there and it's like, I'm not going anywhere. Or when you're in Starbucks, you put all your books like, yeah, I'm not going anywhere. Because it's like, it's so hard to find a spot. None of us act that way with the church. Some of us do. Some of us do that. You have to get the front seat. You know, like, put their coat here, put their shoulder here, put over there. You get what I'm saying, people? Make sense? Claim your spot. There's not that much space. Fight for your spot. We're so competitive with so many other things. Right? We need to get into the top program. I need to make it to the top of the ladder. I need to do this, I need to do that. I need to put this many hours. I'm just not going to make it. I'm going to apply. I'm going to interview. I'm going to do 3 interviews, 4 interviews. For what, people? For what? What are you going to get at the end? We don't even do this with our own salvation. We don't do this with the church. We don't seek to understand why things are the way they are. We just complain. And what we do is throw ourselves out. No one threw you out, people. You threw yourself out. You said, I give up, peace. We become like a Jonah, throw me out. And we hope to God a whale swallows us and spits us up later. Right? Alright. That's St. Nicholas punching Nestorians, okay? I'm going to explain that. And that's St. Athanasius. I'm going to go back to Economia and Archivia. This is a small case study that I'm doing for a paper. It's just a simple way of understanding this. And I'm going to kind of give you my opinion on this so that it makes sense for you. Like I said earlier, one of the criteria for the priesthood is an age, right? 30 years old, right? But I consider this a less weightier matter. Why? Because there's other canons that say things like, his orthodoxy must be pure. Think about that. This person that we're ordaining to the priesthood must be at a certain level, right? He has to have the orthodox faith. Wouldn't you say that's more important than the age? Right? What's more weightier? Someone's age or their knowledge of God? Knowledge of God, right? Their purity of the orthodox faith. And then what comes second is probably something like their moral life, right? The ethics and the morals that they live by, right? I can't just take someone, oh, you meet the age requirement, oh, you went to seminary, yeah, but you do this, this, and this, and that, and yeah, you could become a priest. You know what I mean? You get what I'm saying? There's a criteria, but the least weighty matter is what? The age. So when you deal with a canonist in the church, it makes sense to evaluate it in such a way where there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These have economia. This one has economia. These are archivia. So we shouldn't be archivia with something like whatever, and economia with something that's like huge. That's huge, man. Like the guy doesn't know anything, right? You can't just say, oh, he knows a hand and he's 30, oh, make him a priest. Forgive me, that's what we've been doing, right? I'll give you a perfect proof of what I just said. Athanasius went to the Council of Nicaea as a deacon at the year 325. Right? Right? He was 25 years old as a deacon. 3 years later, he was made a bishop of Alexandria. That means pope. What does that mean? What council was held in 315? Neo-Caesarea, which was what? 10 years ago. Can you imagine? 10 years ago in a local council, they said, you cannot become a priest at the age of anything less than 30. And then 10 years later, Athanasius what? Doesn't just become a priest, becomes a bishop of Alexandria, like the best church in the whole thing. Right? You got like the best life. You're going to tell me, whoa, that's some serious economia, man. Right? But think about Arius. You know how old Arius was when he was ordained a priest? He was like 40 something. So check. Oh, 30, check. Neo Caesarea 15, check. Is that the right way to think about canon law? Do you guys see where I'm going with this stuff? The purity of his order. Who was the heretic at the end? Arius. Who was the defender of the faith at the end? Athanasius. Does age have anything to do with this? Yes. But it's a less weightier matter. Guys, I'm not trying to make a point about anything. I'm just doing a case study. My professor told me to do this, so I did it. Okay? Make sense? I'm not speaking about myself. Don't go around telling people all this stuff. No. Okay? I will punch you like that.
Why is it not like a general thing? Why is it on a like a bishop or a case by case basis? Especially in like, let's say, like, you know what you mentioned, the divorce part.
Yeah.
Like, I understand it has to be case by case.
Yeah.
How you deal with your like with the rest of the church.
So Athanasius was an exception to the rule. So we can't say, well, oh, he's an exception too. We can't say that either. Do you know what I mean? That's what I'm saying here. What I'm saying here is there's exceptions to the rule. Perfect example. But I should not justify a decision that the bishop is going to make for me because historically there is an account of it going that way. So I could try to make a case and argue with the bishop, like, oh, that's not right, you didn't do that with the other person, you're not fair. But remember what I said earlier, you're a different person. You're not completely Athanasius. Athanasius, was 25, but there's much more to Athanasius at 25 than just his age. You get what I'm saying? You have to understand that it's case by case. There's no two identical fingerprints. There's no two identical cases in the church. And that's why the bishop has to have super good discernment and wisdom and pray. And that's why things get even brought to a council. So it's not just like you're not at the mercy of one guy. You're at the mercy of the council and like the church as a whole. Am I answering you, or is it like confusing you or not answering you?
I think it would be more like, why wouldn't all the bishops do the same thing? But I guess it comes back down to the case by case basis.
Yeah. They're not all going to do the same exact thing. Guys, this is a big misconception in the church that it's identical. That, oh my God, that Abuna over there said this word differently, and we said it here like this. Oh my God, we're not in community. Are you serious? What if I told you that Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt in the 4th century they were praying two different liturgies? They didn't even know what they were doing. What if I told you that? You're going to tell me, oh my God, there's a split? That's not a real schism, people. A real schism is theological, dogmatic disagreement. Okay? What is that, lid? I'm just kidding. Alright. I don't even feel like I need to go any further. I'm just going to stop because I'm probably going over time. Does anyone have a question, comment, anything? I still took like half an hour.
Yeah, you don't need to overcomplicate this, but I was just wondering if you could shed some light on why there could be a distinction for lesser or greater dogma, but the way that the Orthodox Church thinks about sin isn't necessarily the same way. Yeah, you don't have to go into detail about it. I was just wondering why, yeah.
All right, I know what you're talking about. Canons. Behind a canon is a dogma. Does that make sense? The canons of the church are the application of the dogma. There's a truth behind the canon.
But there's no flexibility to the dogma.
Yeah, so dogmas are black or white.
Yeah.
It's you're in, you're out, you're on, you're off, you're black, you're white. It's not like there's no gray when it comes to dogma. Like, yeah, it's like this or like this.
So you say canon then is like the expression of that dogma?
Exactly.
And each situation, the bishop has that wisdom to assert dogma the way they feel is appropriate?
Exactly. So, right, when we talk about councils, you find famous language being used.
Yeah.
And it seemed good to us.
Dogmatic.
It seemed good to us. What does that mean? It seemed good to us in what? The Holy Spirit. So that's what we believe. We believe God is that's why the Eastern Church goes as far as to say that canon law is divine inspiration. I'm not going to go into that. I'm not going to make those, I'm not going to say that stuff because I might get in trouble. But they go as far as to say this is divine inspiration.
What's dogma?
Dogma is a teaching or doctrine or, dogma, doctrine, teaching, they're all synonymous. It's just teaching. It's a fancy word for teaching of the church. But these are very important. These are like what distinguish Orthodox, Catholic, Protestant. We need to know what our teaching is on sin, on salvation, on justification, on all these topics. There's an Orthodox view or teaching on all of this stuff. And for us not to know our faith, our Orthodox faith, what the church is teaching on these subjects, means I don't know my faith. Make sense? So we have to look these things up. And it takes a long time to actually start acquiring an Orthodox mind. It doesn't come like overnight, I don't think. And a lot of us are not equipped to do it. I'm not saying I am or he is or she isn't. I'm just saying we grew up not hearing this stuff. Like, I've been through servants prep 3 times in 3 different churches. I never heard anyone speak about canon. You get what I mean? Like, okay, that's just what it is. I heard about it a lot later. But we haven't. That's why we encourage people to study and come on. Let's get the church where it needs to be. Because we're asking a lot of questions, we want to know more. And these things can't just be things in closets that we find later on and say, what is this? Like, we don't even know what to do with it. Does anyone else have a question, comment, concern? Sorry, this might have been heavy. It might have been. Have you ever heard of this stuff? Okay, some of you. I think for the rest of you, this may be new or you casually heard about it. But if you have any questions, if you want more guidance, these are books that I have on it. So come and look at it. Glory be to God for everything.